it rolling, Bob?
Is it rolling, Bob?
Is it rolling, Bob?
Hi folks, it's Chris Gregory here, and this is Bob Dylan, A Head Full of Ideas. This is part 3 of Bob Dylan's Songs of Social Protest. The melodic ballads Seven Curses and Percy's Song, which were considered for the Times album, both focus strongly on the issue of justice. Corrupt and unsympathetic judges are at the centre of both narratives. Seven Curses is set in some undeterminate place in a past era, possibly in the American West. It tells the story of a young woman who reluctantly agrees to spend the night with a corrupt judge in order to save her father from hanging. The judge duly takes advantage of her, but he hangs the father anyway. This is actually a very similar plot to Shakespeare's Measure for Measure, and a number of traditional ballads are based on variants of the story. Sometimes the corrupt official is a hangman rather than a judge, as in Leadbelly's Gallows Pole, which you may have heard being performed by Led Zeppelin on their third album. Dylan relates his version with great lyrical economy over a pretty finger-picked guitar figure and a melody based on Anathea, an English version of the Hungarian folk song Fehér Anna, White Anna. The song has been covered a number of times, most notably by folk artists June Tabor and the Oyster Band and Joan Baez. It contains a number of memorable phrases. We learn that when the judge saw Riley's daughter, his old eyes deepened in his head, giving us a graphic image of this lustful and evil old man. Dylan employs some examples of poetic, pathetic fallacy. The gallows shadow shook the evening. In the night a hound dog bayed. In the night the grounds were groaning. In the night the price was paid. Dylan again skillfully places dialogue in the mouths of the characters. The lascivious judge cackles, "Gold will never free your father. The price, my dear, is you instead." Old Riley tells the girl not to accede to the judge's demands. He says, "My skin will surely crawl if he touches you at all." But sadly, she ignores him. The last two verses enumerate the 7 curses on a judge so cruel, which consists of a rather odd list. 1 doctor, 2 healers, 3 eyes, 4 ears, 5 walls, 6 diggers, and 7 deaths. The unnamed narrator wishes him to be in such great pain that 7 deaths shall never kill him. The choice of 7 does, however, seem a little bit random, and the ending of the song is rather anticlimactic. Dylan falls into the trap of delivering his own judgment on the situation, which is arguably unnecessary, as the moral outlines of the story have already been clearly delineated. The remarkable Percy's Song also features another unproductive encounter with a judge. The narrator visits the judge to plead for clemency for an unnamed friend, presumably Percy, who's been sentenced to 99 years in jail for accidentally crashing a car in which the passengers were killed. The judge, however, is rude and unresponsive. The song conveys deep sadness and despair, but does so with admirable restraint. The beautiful flowing melody is derived from Paul Clayton's song The Wind and the Rain. The song is also distinguished by its compelling refrain. Every second line in each of the 16 verses runs "turn, turn again," while every 4th line, except for in the last verse, is "turn, turn to the wind and the rain." This is very reminiscent of Shakespeare's song When That I Was a Tiny Little Boy, sung by the jester at the end of Twelfth Night, which has a very similarly structured use of the lines with a "hey ho, the wind and the rain," and "for the rain it raineth every day." Dylan's version was not released until it was included on the collection Biograph in 1965, but the song was popularised by Fairport Convention on their album Unhalf Bricking, in which lead vocalist Sandy Denny, the great Sandy Denny, delivers a truly spellbinding performance which brings out the song's mixture of emotions with great power and sympathy. And this is really one of the great Dylan covers. Check that out, Unhalf Bricking, Fairport Convention. Much of the effectiveness of Percy's song lies in the way that the narrative itself is related in such a clear and unfussy way. The song begins with the portentous bad news came to me where I sleep. The opening verses consist of a conversation between the narrator and an unnamed mutual acquaintance who tells him that one of your friends is in trouble deep. The conversation is edited down to the essentials. The friend merely states Joliet prison and 99 years, and later manslaughter in the highest of degrees. The narrator then writes to the judge to arrange an appointment. The conversation with the judge is handled in a similarly minimal manner. The narrator is quite direct. Can you tell me the facts? I said without fear that a friend of mine would get 99 years, but the hard-hearted judge isn't swayed by his appeal. After he states the bare facts of the case, we hear that he spoke out of the side of his mouth, citing the testimony of a witness that left little doubt. The narrator's further appeals, such as 99 years he just don't deserve and what happened to him could have happened to anyone, fall on deaf ears. We are told that the judge jerked forward and his face it did freeze. The narrator walks away in a state of sad incomprehension. The song ends with a dramatic variation on the established refrain, and I played my guitar through the night to the day. Turn, turn, turn again. And the only tune my guitar could play was Oh, the cruel rain and the wind. The only conclusion is that we are all subject to the cruel vagaries of life. Injustices happen, but sometimes we're powerless to reverse them. The anthropomorphized guitar, that ever trusty source of comfort, knows this well. Percy's song clearly demonstrate that Dylan's skills as a storyteller in song have become more nuanced. This time, he doesn't deliver any curses, but by telling the story in such a relatively detached way, he makes the tragic nature of the tale more relatable. And this is one of the great songs that Dylan never recorded on his albums. The Ballad of Hollis Brown, which was included on the Times They Are A-Changing album, makes its point with stark and devastating clarity. It relates a tale of the fate of a poor farmer in South Dakota who suffers from crop failure, which threatens him and his family with starvation. The pressure builds up on Hollis until he kills his wife, his 5 children, and then himself. The song is a highly dramatic and atmospheric morality tale which builds inexorably towards a tragic ending. It also effectively illustrates how Dylan has begun to combine his various influences. Although it's called a ballad, it uses the typically repeated lines and rhythmic guitar strumming that characterize the blues. This is partly because, in terms of its melody and approach, it is to some extent modelled on the version of the traditional murder ballad Pretty Polly, which was recorded by the blues-influenced Appalachian singer and banjo player Doc Boggs. Dylan played this song several times in the folk clubs in 1961, in a version which was based on Boggs's model. As with John Brown and Seven Curses, we're not told where or when the story of Hollis Brown takes place. We could be in the Wild West of the 19th century or the Depression of the 1920s or 30s. Dylan may, however, have drawn the story from matters that were very much closer to home, both in terms of time and location. The song is set in South Dakota, which borders on Dylan's home state of Minnesota. In the 1950s, the state experienced an outbreak of black stem rust, devastating the wheat harvest. The fictional Hollis Brown could well have been one of the farmers who suffered. However, the lack of historical context adds to the atmosphere of the song and makes its moral lessons more universal. Dylan played versions of Hollis Brown throughout his career, often with full band backing, with around 200 performances on the Never-Ending Tour between 1988 and 2012. It was also re-recorded in the studio in 1993 with Mike Seeger on Doc Boggs-style banjo. Many cover versions exist by artists as diverse as Barb Younger, Iggy Pop, Nina Simone and the Neville Brothers. Its use of a basic blues format, making it adaptable to rock, blues and jazz arrangements. The song begins with the ominous-sounding repetitive blues riff that will be repeated throughout, reflecting the build-up of tension. The terse narrative begins. Hollis Brown, he lived on the outside of town. Hollis Brown, he lived on the outside of town, with his wife and 5 children and his cabin broken down. The name Hollis Brown, which may have been chosen to facilitate the internal rhyme, isn't mentioned again. We never hear the names of his family. Dylan then switches to a rather intimate second-person address. It is as if the narrator is a fly on the wall at these events, or possibly a voice inside Hollis's head. We hear that you look for work and money and you walked a ragged mile, which echoes the nursery rhyme, There was a crooked man, who lives with a crooked cat and a crooked mouse in a crooked house. Hollis himself is certainly such a crooked man, not in the sense of criminality, but in the state of his mental health, as we shall learn. The next lines are especially shocking. Your children are so hungry that they don't know how to smile. Dylan then increases the tension by switching to the present tense for the rest of the song. The throbbing blues riff mirrors Hollis's pounding heartbeat as he descends into panic. The next few verses alternate between harrowing descriptions of how members of the family react to the situation and the distant, unemotional narrative voice. We hear that your baby's eyes look crazy now, they're tugging at your sleeve, and later, your babies are crying louder now, it's a pounding on your brain, and your wife's screams are stabbing you like the dirty driving rain, while the rats have got your flour, bad blood it got your mare, and your grass is turning black, there's no water in your well. Very, very evocative lines. Then we get perhaps the most shocking lines of all. You prayed to the Lord above, oh please send me a friend, which is followed by your empty pockets tell you that you ain't got no friends. This is a godless universe. There'll be no divine intervention to save Hollis and his family. Coyotes, which are animals notorious for feeding on the kills of other creatures, howl in the distance like devils. Hollis is quite literally in hell. It's perhaps this lack of divine guidance that finally drives Hollis to his terrible act. Dylan uses repetition in successive verses to build up the pressure. In a couple of intense cinematic close-ups, we are first told that your eyes fix on the shotgun that's hanging on the wall, and then your eyes fix on the shotgun that you're holding in your hand. The last 2 verses are especially poignant. Your brain is a-bleeding and your legs can't seem to stand, indicates that Hollis is experiencing a complete mental breakdown. The repetition of the word 7 now dominates the narrative. There are 7 breezes blowing around your cabin door, a line which echoes Stephen Foster's famous ballad Hard Times, another song about rural poverty, which Dylan will later cover. Then we hear that 7 shots ring out like the ocean's pounding roar. This pounding of the ocean is reminiscent of both the crying of the baby and Hollis's own heartbeat. The murder itself is reported as if we are watching a long shot of the cabin in the distance, like as if in this movie the act itself is too terrible to show. If we are in any doubt as to what has taken place, Dylan spells it out. There's 7 people dead on a South Dakota farm. Clearly indicates that Hollis has killed his wife, his 5 children, and finally himself. The concluding line puts the story in a wider context. Somewhere in the distance, there's 7 new people born, indicating that this awful event will soon be forgotten. Perhaps it will merit a few lines in a newspaper. Thus, Hollis stands as a symbol of all the victims of poverty, war, and starvation throughout history. His death has, of course, occurred in a very rich country. Thus, the song can be interpreted as a protest against the lack of support for struggling farmers and poor people in general in the United States with its very limited welfare system. The only God here is money. So, as I said last time, these songs are certainly getting darker and darker. Do tune in for part 4 of Bob Dylan's Songs of Social Protest. Do check out my website, www.chrisgregory.org. See you then. Bye-bye.
Is it rolling, Bob?
Is it rolling, Bob?
Bob?